Good morning, everybody. It is good to be here. I almost said it's good to be back. That's because I was at a men's retreat the last couple of days that the North County Spanish Church had hosted, and they asked me if I could come and speak, and I told them I haven't preached in Spanish in 10 years, and they didn't seem to care. Like, we all speak English. So I did my best with my Spanish, and every now and again I'd say, how do I say, because I forget. The funny one was when I said, how do I say Sabbath in Spanish? Because I had forgotten how to say Sabbath. And so I go on the computer, I'm like, how do you say Sabbath in Spanish? And it's sábado, which is the same word they have for Saturday. Same word. Learning curve there, learning curve. Speaking of curves, we also have curses and cures. So we're going to do a short series on curses and cures in the Bible because there's a couple of really important curses that come down. And there's some important cures that also come along the way to try and fix the curse. And as I was sitting with doing my slides, and my daughter Natalie was sitting beside me, and she goes, Dad, why do you have so many slides with all these words? She's a girl of few words. If you ask her a question, she will just give you the straight yes or no answer, which is the opposite of me. I tend to go on and on, even with a yes or no question. And she's, are you going to do those things where you have more words on a page, and then you give even more words as you read all the words that are on the page? I'm like, yep, that's what I'm going to do. Well, that's how I do it. I want to think about making good choices. Have you ever wished you could put a lock on your pantry where all your snacks are? Right? Because you just can't trust yourself to have snacks and you in the same room. And so you got to put a little lock pad on that snack drawer, and maybe it'd be helpful if you didn't know the keypad to get back into that. I actually know a family that did this. Some friends of mine up in Escondido, they put a lock pad on their pantry door, and inside they have a walk-in pantry. Right? And we're not talking about just like one door with some stuff in it. They have a pantry you walk into. It's bigger than our pantry here at church. And they put a lock pad on it, and they told me the code, but they don't tell their own kids the code. Because their kids will go into it, and it's all snacks. It's all stuff you shouldn't eat, and so you always do eat it, right? Kids don't have the lock code pass. They can't get into that door because if they did, there'd be nothing left, and they would never eat lunch or dinner. Because they're really bad at making wise choices, and sometimes we're really bad at making wise choices as well. We're going to read, if you grew up in church, you know the Bible, you might already kind of guess where I'm going with this because, so to speak, God put a sort of lock pad on a garden in the form of an angel with a flaming sword, right? So they can't get back in because they had proven to themselves and to all of us throughout all of history that people are really bad at making good choices. We're just not good at it. We are not good at it, and it's, for me, I read it and I find it to be a very playful story. For others, they find it to be like nearly the end of the world type of story. I find it playful. You might find it tragic. Be that as it may, I find it a very playful story because they have this one really simple rule. I mean, of all the rules, rules are simple, actually, if you think about it. You're driving down the road and there's a sign that says speed limit's 55. Come on, how hard is that? Don't go over 55 miles an hour. But you know you do, and I'm talking to 100% of you. Stop! Stop sign. Clear as day what you're supposed to do with that stop sign, but do you do it? Yes, I do. I actually even do it sometimes in parking lots where they have a stop sign because I'm a good citizen of this country. Unlike some y'all who be rolling through stop signs. How hard is it? Just stop. It's very clear what you're supposed to do. Just stop. But we are horrible at taking instruction, especially if you're an adult. Kids, believe it or not, kids actually do a little better at following rules than you do because you think, me too, I'm an adult, I make my own choices. I do my own rules. We can't follow the simplest of instructions. If you're trying to lose weight, you will make the bad choice of eating that stack of Oreos. Or as Brian Regan, the comedian, says, he eats fig Newtons by the sleeve. That's one serving, a whole sleeve of fig Newtons, because he loves them. We're horrible. We need someone to put a lock pad on the pantry. But no one really ever does. So let's read the first curse. This is going to be a three-part lesson. That's the way I have it programmed in my head. You only get one part today. We're going to look at the first curse. The first curse. In the day that Yahweh God made the earth and the heavens, when no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no vegetation of the field had yet sprung up, for Yahweh God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no Adam to till the Adamah. Now I just put that there because I want you to see how playful this story is being told. Because in Hebrew, a way to refer to a man is to call him an Adam. That's why we call Adam and Eve. That's why we call him Adam, because that just means mankind. But the land is called Adamah. So there's all these plays on words that happen throughout this story, puns and words that sound like one another. He says, the Bible says, no plant existed because there was no one there to work it. So the first thing God has to do in this story, now remember there's two creation stories, this is the second one. In this story, he has to create Adam, he has to create the man, so that then he can create plants so the man can work the plants. In the first story, man comes at the very end, last thing. In this story, plants come first. Man then comes after the plants, so that, actually man comes first, so he can then have plants to work. So there's no Adam to till the Adamah. There's no man to take care of the land. But a mist would rise from the earth. Because remember, it says there's no rain. So how are these plants going to grow? What's going to happen? Well, a mist would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the Adamah. Then Yahweh God formed Adam from the dust of the Adamah and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the Adam became a living being. And so we see this connection between us and the earth we live on. As an American, through and through, I do not feel a deep connection to the earth. I just don't. I grew up kind of more believing that the earth was here for me to take advantage of and to kind of exploit the resources so that I can have what it is I want. But this story says it's the other way around. Actually, we're created to work the land, not exploit it, but to serve it, to work with it. And in fact, out of the very land, the dust of the ground, we were made. The Adam was made from the Adamah, and God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the Adam became a living being. It sounds really good. Like things are trekking pretty good so far. We got ourselves a good, positive story. No way it could turn south at any moment. By the way, some of you have been here a while. You know this is exactly how the Bible works all the time. Every single time you think you've got yourself a perfect world, it turns out it's not. Right? Flood of Noah says the earth was just consumed with corruption and violence and bloodshed, and so God sends the flood to clean off all the sinners. Except for Noah and his family, because Noah was blameless and upright before God. And so God had grace on Noah, or Noah found grace in the eyes of God. And God starts all over with these 8, and the story ends after all the flood and death and mayhem. The story ends with God saying, humans are evil from their youth. Didn't really seem to fix anything. Or God gives them the law of Moses, and they have this law, and they're getting ready to do their very first celebration commanded by the law. Probably it was Yom Kippur, or they're kind of like their new year, this day of celebration. And then they end up doing it wrong. Everything's ready. The tabernacle's built. They have the law. They've consecrated the priest. It's perfect. Until it's not. And 2 people end up dead. We even see it in the New Testament, in the book of Acts. The Holy Spirit has been poured out upon the people, and people are speaking in tongues, and there's miracles, and everything's going great, and they're all giving of their wealth to help the poor. But then there's 2 people they almost always come in twos. These 2 people, Ananias and Sapphira, they're kind of like the Adam and Eve of the New Testament. They lie. No, we gave you everything that we have. We sold our house and gave you everything, but they actually didn't give everything. They only gave about half of what they'd garnered. But so far, Genesis 2, we're dialed in. This one's going to be different than all the other ones I just shared. This one, it has to be. And Yahweh God planted a garden in Eden. Now the word Eden means place of pleasure. Yahweh planted a garden in the place of pleasure in the east. And there he put the Adam who he had formed. Out of the Adamah Yahweh God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. Everything's wonderful. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. Now, if you're wondering why I put the word bad instead of evil, it's because in English, evil means one thing and bad means another. But in Hebrew, it's all the same word, just bad. Remember the stack, the sleeve of fig Newtons? That's bad for you. Doing some horrible thing is also bad. Running a stop sign is also bad. Pigging out when you're not supposed to pig out, that's also bad. If you have high cholesterol and you eat red meat every day, it's not a good choice. It's all bad. So he's got these two trees. One gives knowledge, which seems like a good thing. The other one gives life, which also is a good thing. Right in the middle of the garden. Something might go wrong. You ever read a story and think, I feel like something bad might happen. Yahweh God took the Adam and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and to keep it. And Yahweh God commanded the Adam, you may freely eat of every tree in the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall die. Okay. Now I feel like something is like for real, for sure, definitely going to go wrong. Why? Because we are horrible at making good choices. They have one rule. One rule. Don't eat from that tree. How hard is that? It's as hard as coming to a complete and full stop at a stop sign. Till you feel wheels roll back. It's that hard to not eat from that tree. That's pretty easy. Except you're going to want to do it. At the men's retreat, I was talking to a guy. He's like, hey, do you know this comedian? And I can't remember his name now, the name of the comedian. And I was like, no, I don't know the name of that comedian. I don't know who that is. Don't look him up. Well, I got to look him up now. I had no intention of looking him up until you said, don't look him up. Probably because he might be wildly inappropriate for a minister of the word. Don't look him up, but I think you'd like him. We're given decisions every day, right? Well, you think I'd like him? You think I think he's funny, but don't look him up? That tree's going to give you the knowledge of good and bad. You don't eat it. I feel like I kind of have to eat it now. That's why those parents put a lock pad on the pantry door. Because those kids don't know any better than to eat every single Oreo in that new package of Oreos they bought. Double stuff if you know how to get a good Oreo. Something is going to go wrong with this story because we are awful at making good choices. Genesis chapter 3, now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal. You'll see, in crafty the word is arum. And when they listen to arum, they realize that they are naked, which is erom. So again, playful. Adam, Adama, erom, erum. It's a very playful story. So now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God say, you shall not eat from any tree in the garden? The serpent knows that that is not what God said. That's not what God said at all. The woman said to the serpent, no, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die. Now she's misquoting what God had said. Either because Adam, the only person that would have heard the instruction, gave it to her wrong, or she is creating an extra barrier. It's hard to eat something that you do not touch. I don't know if you've ever tried that or not. Eat it, don't touch it. Well, you're going to touch it with something. So if I make another rule that says I can't touch it, well, now all you have are two things that you shouldn't do that you really want to do. See, that's the problem with rules sometimes is all it does is I'm going to put a rule around that rule so that I really don't do it. Now you've got multiple rules that you really want to break. And like I said, and adults are the worst at this. If you've ever tried to lead a group of adults to obey something, it's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible to get adults to follow the program. She says, no, serpent, you were wrong. It's not what God said. Actually, he said this, and he said not even touch it, or you'll die. But the serpent said to the woman, you will not die. You're not going to put on weight if you eat that sleeve of Fig Newtons, that pack of Oreos. Your cholesterol will stay exactly the same. Eat steak every day. It'll stay exactly the same. Nobody knows what they're talking about. You'll be fine. You will not die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened. And this part is true. Their eyes are open. But what they discover is that they are Edom, right? They listen to Edom and they become Edom. Or at least they realize they are. They listen to craftiness and they become and realize their nakedness. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and bad. The problem is they're not ready to know good and bad. When you have children, you try to protect them from certain things because they're not old enough. Their maturity isn't where it needs to be for them to understand those things. Adam and Eve, her name's not Eve yet, but it becomes Eve later. They're not ready for this. Satan tries to convince her that she needs an upgrade. My computer's been telling me I need to upgrade from Windows 10 for about 1.5 years or 2 years. I refuse to do it. Do you know why? Because I'm trying to make a wise choice for once in my life. You ever notice every time you think, oh, this is an upgrade, it's going to be great. You're going to be able to do, you go into a store and some guy at a kiosk says, hey, you need a new cell phone. Yes, I do. I need to upgrade my old phone to the new phone, right? Oh, man, I don't know how to use this phone. This is horrible. Give me my old phone back. The serpent says, you need an upgrade. You guys are walking around. You don't know what's good and bad. That's part of the whole point. In that place, they don't need to know. They are perfectly fine not knowing good from bad. No, but you need to know. You need an upgrade. And there is an apocalypse approaching. You know, an apocalypse, yeah. There's this life-shattering, earth-changing moment that's about to have. Because if you can imagine living in a place where all you do is a little bit of work in the ground and you have everything you need. All the food you need, fresh, clean water. I skipped over some verses. There's some fresh and clean rivers that run through this place. You know, all the water you want. There's gold and there's all this beautiful minerals that are in the land. This is just this perfect place. It's called the place of pleasure. If you could imagine living in a place like that, you might think it sounds a little like Chula Vista. But it's not. It's not like Chula Vista at all. But all that's about to get turned over. All in this story, all this is about to get put head over heels. And that's what, in modern day, when we say an apocalypse, that's what we mean. Where your entire way of life is changed sometimes in a moment. Everything they've ever known is about to change. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was a delight to the eyes, that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to the man who was with her, and he ate. This is why I love the analogy of the food pantry so much, because this whole story is talking about food. Right? The whole analogy is food and making wise food choices, but it's meant to symbolize something bigger than that. She's like, I see it. It looks good. Things that you're not supposed to have, they always look good. I don't think I've ever eaten anything that was bad for me that also looked really bad. Because it looked really bad, I ain't eating it. Just not going to touch it. It looks gross. Usually, the thing that looks gross is what's good for you. How many of you like papaya? What's wrong with you people? The very smell of papaya is off-putting. But papaya is wonderful for you. It's one of the healthiest fruits you can eat. But I won't touch it. She's there. Many people also misunderstand the story. They'll say, look, Eve ruined everything, and, it was Adam. Like, the man is right there with her. She's like, yeah, this does look good. Adam, take a bite. They're both there. They eat the fruit. It says, then the eyes of both were opened. It's exactly what the serpent said was going to happen. And they knew that they were Edom. They listened to Arum and they become Edom, right? Or at least they realized they were always Edom the whole time. They just didn't know it. When you listen to Arum, you become Edom. It's part of the point. We miss it in English because there's no connection between craftiness and nakedness. So they realize, we naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. We're also incredibly inept at clothing ourselves or making up for the mistakes we've made. We just never can quite do it right. They heard the sound of Yahweh God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze. And this too was about to change for them, this hearing God walking with them in the garden. It's an apocalypse. It's all about to change. And the man and his woman hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh God among the trees of the garden. It's playful. This is a fun story. Can you imagine hiding from God behind a tree? It's pure silliness. You can't hide from God anywhere, really, but behind a tree. It's like playing hide and go seek with a child, where they put the blanket over themselves, but they're in the middle of the floor. And you have to pretend you can't find them, right? Like, oh, Sarah, where are you at, Sarah? Right? She's obviously right there under that blanket on the flat floor. Trying to hide from God. But Yahweh God called to the man and said to him, where are you? Adam, where are you at? You totally see him hiding behind that skinny tree, his whole body. Fig leaves all over himself. He's a mess. He said, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid. Every other time Adam had heard the sound of God in the garden, he was not afraid. That's all. We're already seeing the apocalypse. It's all starting to change now. And I was afraid. Why are you afraid? Because I was Edom. I listened to Arum and I became Edom. Oh no. I was naked and so I hid myself. See, even Adam knows his fig leaves aren't stitched very well. He still says, I was naked. Well, you got some leaves on. Yeah, it's not good. He said, who told you that you were naked? Now, if you read this, you might be tempted to say, oh, well, the serpent told him. Nope. The serpent's pretty much done talking at this point. This knowledge of good and bad is what told him. That's how he knows. Because he did what he wasn't supposed to do. My son, Caden, asked me the other day as I stopped at a complete stop in a parking lot. No cars anywhere. He goes, Dad, why did you stop all the way? I said, well, one, because there's a stop sign, and two, because once I rolled through a red light and it was a $500 ticket. Saved me about 3 seconds. $500, one of those camera things got me. I'm against camera lights. It cost me $500. But you see what I mean? One, it's the right thing to do. Two is, if I do the wrong thing, I'm going to get punished. So I stop. I'm supposed to stop because even though I think there's no one coming, maybe there is, and I just missed it. Maybe there's a small child running, and I just didn't see them looking for cars, not a small child. You come to a stop. Who told you you were a Rome? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? Now, this is where Adam and I have a lot in common, because that's a yes or no question. Right? Did you or did you not? Well, the simple answer is, if you want me to be direct, is yes. And that's the end of the answer. But that's not what he does. He says, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me from the fruit of the tree, and I ate. That's a long yes. That is a very long yes. And I appreciate Adam for that. It's a long yes. But he almost turns it back on God and says, you know that person that you made special for me? We skipped over this part of the story, but you know that person you made special for me when I was all alone in this garden? And all these animals came before me, and you paraded them in front of me, and I gave them all names, and I kept thinking, this next animal is going to be the one that's my animal, my mate. And she just never showed up ever. And so you took half of me, and you made a whole new human, and we came back together, the two halves met up, and remember that woman? The one you gave me? So it turns out since the beginning of time, men have been blaming women for all their problems. And Adam is blaming God for giving him a woman. The woman whom she gave to you to be with me, she gave me fruit from the tree. And I ate. Then Yahweh God said to the woman, okay, let's start with Adam. We'll go over to Eve. What is this that you have done? The woman said, the serpent tricked me. Remember, he's very crafty. He's very Arum, this serpent. He tricked me. Mr. Arum tricked me and turned me into Arum. The serpent tricked me. He did trick her. He tricked her about as much as rolling through a stop sign, though. I mean, it's pretty simple. Just don't eat from it. He tricked me. Well, he did, but he shouldn't have been able to. Pretty simple instructions. Don't eat it. The serpent tricked me, and I ate. At least to her credit, God didn't ask her a yes or no question. She was allowed to expand. This is what I did. The Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed. Remember, this is the whole story about cursed and cures. Curses and cures. Because you have done this, cursed are you among all animals, and among all wild creatures. Upon your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. And this is what's called an etiological story. It explains, in some ways, why don't serpents have legs? Well, this is why they don't have legs, right? Because they're cursed to crawl upon the dust of the earth, the place where people go when they die, the very place they came from to be made alive. They return. That snake's going to roll around that dust all the days of its life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. Now, for a lot of people, they see a prophecy in this. And I don't blame them for seeing it. But it's just interesting to note that not a single New Testament author found it to be prophetic. Isn't that weird? For as much as we hear this being a prophecy about Jesus, isn't it strange that the apostles never said it? It's weird. I think maybe they missed one. To the woman he said, I will make your pangs in childbirth exceedingly great. In pain you shall bring forth children, yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. This has become one of the favorite curses that men have always wanted. But make no mistake, this is a curse. This is not a blessing. This is a curse. So why do you, men, this is specifically to you, so why do you want it so bad? It's a curse. This is not how it was supposed to be. Now, Jesus will go back and say, hey, in the beginning, he talks about marriage. In the beginning, it was not so. And he goes back into this story. Jesus doesn't go, in the beginning, after the fall, this is how it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be. This is precisely how things are not supposed to be. But in the church, we have said, but this is how we want them. Wrong. You do not want a curse. But like I said, we're really bad at making decisions. And somehow, for whatever reason, we pick curse 9 times out of 10. This is one of them. We choose it so much, we're proud of it sometimes. Don't choose a curse. This is a curse. The original intent of Adam and Eve in the garden was Adam needed help. Another way to say that is Adam could not do what Adam needed to do without her. He was incomplete and unable. Now in English we have this word we say, so she came along as a helpmate, right? She came along as someone to help him, which is true, but help him by completing him. He is an incomplete individual without her. So they come together. The word in Hebrew is ezer, and that means strength and shield. When it says God is your strength, it says God is your ezer. Eve was his ezer. But it's an apocalypse. And everything got flipped upside down. This is not how it's supposed to be. I think I've made that point. Let's move on. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your woman, and have not eaten of the tree, and have eaten of the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground. Now this is interesting because you would think cursed would be Adam. But it is the ground that is cursed, which in turn kind of sort of does curse Adam because he was created to work the ground and have it produce food. But things are about to get a whole lot tougher. Whole lot tougher. You shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. Then Yahweh God said, see, the humans have become like one of us, knowing good and bad, but unlike us, they keep choosing bad. And now they might reach out their hands and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. I find this really curious. If you have one tree that gives death, right? And if you eat of it, you'll die. So you got a tree of death. And you have a tree of life, and they're side by side. We don't have a single story of Adam and Eve ever taking from the tree of life. We only have a story about them eating from the tree of death. It makes me wonder, did they ever eat from the tree of life? Or do they just have to roll through every stop sign they see? Therefore Yahweh God sent them forth from the Garden of Eden to till the Adamah from which they were taken. He drove out the Adams, right, the humans. He drove them out. At the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed the cherubim and a sword flaming and turning to guard the way to the tree of life. The apocalypse happened. Life is in turmoil. Everything is upside down. What does this story mean? What is this story all about? Now, I love this story. It's a wonderful story. There's so much to it to think about and contemplate. We have a story about two trees. They both give food. And God says, well, one brings life and one brings death. Choose wisely. Another way to say it is one brings blessing and another brings curses. Choose wisely. Deuteronomy 30, 19 through 20. I have set before you life and death. And I'm convinced when this was written, they had the story of Adam and Eve in mind. Because this is the very thing God does in the garden. He sets before them two trees, life and death. Choose life, but they choose death. I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him. For that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land. Where were they driven out of? Adam and Eve. Where were they driven out of? The land. Out of Eden. Out of the idyllic place and into a place of pain and sorrow and hurt. And that place is more like Chula Vista. Nothing's easy. Nothing's easy. You got to work so hard for the little you get. But God says, I have put before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so you can live long in the land, so you don't get sent off into exile. Which, if you know the story of Israel, is what happens to them. Choose life and live. But what can God do for people who constantly choose the curse? How is God going to fix this? I mean, sometimes I look at my own life, I'm like, I feel like I'm unfixable sometimes. I just keep doing the same dumb thing over again. You'd think I'd learn. Apparently my good quality is I'm very persistent. Constantly doing the wrong thing, right? What's God going to do to get us out of this curse mindset? Is there a cure for humanity? The curses and the cures. I feel like we're out of time. I think it's come to an end here. You might be feeling a little disappointed that I'm not going into the cures yet. You know what I always say? Just come back for the next episode, next Sunday. Just come back. Let's keep reading it together. If you end the story of Adam and Eve, this is exactly how you should feel. Well, now what? Right? Now what's the procedure? What do we do from here? Where do we go? How do we fix this? I want to get back to that. There's this flaming sword wielded by an angel who's like, doesn't want us to get back there for some reason. I want to get back. How do I get back? What's the code to the pantry? I want to get back in there. The curses and the cures. See you guys next week.